Hi, and welcome back to Hobby Universe Outdoors. I am Len. Today I'm going to be talking about using a 3-point post hole digger on a compact utility tractor. For today's video, it's going to be the John Deere 2025R and the CountyLine post hole digger from Tractor Supply. I've gotten quite a bit of use on this thing over the past couple years, and I've learned some tricks, and I thought I would share some of that stuff with you guys today, as well as a couple small items regarding setup when you initially buy it and some other tips regarding that. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get notified when I upload new videos, and it'll also help me build my channel. Let's get started. When you're buying your post hole digger, you're going to want to make sure that it comes with an auger. I initially thought it would come with an auger. I read online and I misread something, or I just made an assumption, which you should never assume anything, right? But I thought it would come with the auger. Got the kit home, unpacked everything, didn't find the auger, went back to Tractor Supply and asked them, and they said, no, it's not included. You have to get those separately, which I understand, because if they automatically give you a 12-inch, maybe you actually only need a 6-inch, or vice versa. Maybe they give you the 6-inch and you actually need a 12-inch. So it makes sense they don't give you that expensive part of the kit, assuming they know what size auger you're going to need. So back at Tractor Supply, picked up the auger I wanted. The first one I bought was a 12-inch, and since then I've picked up a 6-inch. That's what's currently installed on here. It's the one I used most recently, and it's the one we're going to use for today's demonstration. There are already a lot of videos out there regarding the assembly of one of these CountyLine post hole diggers, as well as connecting it to the back of the tractor. So I'm not going to cover that, but one thing I do want to talk about is the gearbox. When you buy one of these new, and it may not be specific just to CountyLine, I've got to believe that other manufacturers do the same thing. When they ship it with the gearbox empty. Now this does have a sticker on it saying fill gearbox with 80W90 lubricant, because if you don't and you run this thing dry, you're going to drastically reduce the life of that gearbox. So when you get it, look at the manual, find out how much fluid you need, specifically what kind of fluid you need, and get your gearbox filled up before you ever put power to this. Something else you're going to want to consider when you install a post hole digger or even other implements on the back of a compact utility tractor is going to be the available lift of the 3-point system to get that attachment off of the ground. When I initially connected this post hole digger to my tractor, it was just barely touching the ground. So if I was driving over, grassy area, it would just drag a little bit, which wasn't the end of the world, but honestly, I'd much rather have that thing off of the ground. And I've also had some issues with my rototiller. If the rototiller was on the back of the tractor and I was trying to load onto the trailer, that rototiller would scrape the ground pretty hard. So not a fan of that. Did some reading online and found that by adding a second adjustable top link, you could gain some extra lift height. So, as these things come from the factory, you've got one adjustable top link and one fixed. So remove the fixed, got a John Deere OEM adjustable top link. I think it was maybe like $100, which I didn't think was too bad. Installed it, and I did indeed gain extra lift height. Now I didn't do a before and after test, but I have to guess it was at least 4 to 6 inches that I gained. And if I'm sitting on a flat surface and I raise this all the way up, the tip of that auger is now about 6 inches off the ground. So definitely a worthwhile investment if you haven't already done so and you need a little bit of extra height from the lift on your 3-point system. I would look into doing that. Another way you can give up or gain lift height on this post hole digger is going to be with the location of this pin. So the pin passes through the hoop, passes through the arm, and if you were to pull this pin, you could raise this arm up even higher and pass the pin back through, and that would indeed give you some extra lift height. What you're going to lose by doing so is some of the power needed to pull that auger out of the ground. If you're just cruising around or transporting, you obviously don't need a lot of power to lift. But if you're boring a hole in the ground and you get hung up, maybe you're in some really heavy clay soil, which we'll talk about here shortly. But if you start to get hung up, you're really going to want as much pulling power as you can get. So for me, the sweet spot was this hole right here. I still have a decent amount of pulling power, and I have about 6 inches of clearance between the tip of the auger and the ground. So I'm happy with that setting. You may want to experiment depending on what tractor you have and what post hole digger you have, but something to keep in mind. Something else to consider when you're boring holes, especially if you're putting in a fence or whatever it is you're putting in the ground, if you're permanently mounting something like I was just doing, I put in a trellis, you have to make sure you're below the frost line if you're in a part of the world where the ground will freeze. For me, that will indeed happen. The ground will freeze, and my zone is 3 feet. So if I want to get below that frost line, it's going to be 3 feet. What happens if you don't get below the frost line? When the ground freezes, it can cause whatever's mounted in the ground to raise up once that ground freezes, because everything's going to change position a little bit based on the ground expanding as it freezes. So if you put in a fence and it looks great, in July, and then come February, it will actually move, and it can break stuff because, in many cases that stuff wasn't meant to move. When determining how deep you need to go with the auger to get the depth you're looking for, you're going to want to measure from the teeth up and then figure out where that is. So you could wrap a piece of tape around the auger or something like that just to kind of give you that visual indication showing you you're at the correct depth. For me, from the tooth to about here was 3 feet. I simply just went to the bottom of the guard. That way I knew I was over 3 feet, and I'd be in real good shape if I got to that depth. The auger has a screw tip on it. This is what will get the hole started for you. You can use it to get you lined up over the hole. You drop it down, it'll kind of poke itself into the ground a little bit, and this is what will initially get you going. This does not count as part of the hole depth though. This is just to get you started. Your hole depth actually is going to start with these teeth. These teeth are what are going to do the cutting. What they do is, as it goes around, these cut into the ground, remove soil, and the soil travels up the flutes. And then once in a while, you're going to pull the auger out of the ground as it's spinning, and that centrifugal force will disperse the dirt off the side. Then you go back in and you get some more. These teeth are replaceable, so if they get worn or you happen to break one somehow or have any other issues, it's just a bolt. You take the bolt out, you put a new tooth on, you tighten it down, and you're up and running again. What I generally do is put a mark on the ground where I want to make the hole, move the tractor into position so the tip of the auger is exactly over that spot, and then I'll lower the auger so the tip of it is on that spot. And now I can move the tractor back and forth, making sure the auger is perfectly vertical. Once I do that, I will set the parking brake, take it out of gear, increase the RPMs, and start the PTO. With the PTO running, I will keep my hand on the PTO button so I can shut it off in a hurry if I need to, and I will also keep my hand on the lever to raise and lower the PTO. That way, if you get a little overzealous and the auger starts to screw itself into the ground, which it's going to do here in a second, you're going to be able to stop quickly. If you don't stop quickly, even if you're pulling back on that lever to raise it back up, it'll still screw itself into the ground. It's got too much downward pulling force with that corkscrew action to stop it from happening. It'll take itself all the way to the gearbox. The one method I found for freeing the auger up, if it's not stuck too bad, is to simply rock the tractor back and forth, and that'll allow it to pop out in most cases. Now this ground is heavy with clay, but it's fairly dry, so it popped out pretty easy. I've gotten stuck before in a heavy wet clay, and that was an absolute nightmare to get out. I was able to rock the tractor back and forth to free it up, but I had to do so a lot more than I would prefer. I'm not recommending you do this. I'm not saying it's a good idea. This is just something I tried. It worked for me, but do so at your own discretion. Like I always say, I am not an expert. This is just what worked for me. The important thing is to understand the limitations and the capabilities of these smaller tractors. They will get the job done. You just can't push them too far. If you do, you'll learn their limitations real fast. So I was hoping to wrap this one up quick. The bugs were starting to bite. I was getting irritated. And this third time where I get the auger stuck actually wasn't on purpose. I was just trying to get to the bottom of the hole, and boom, just like that, now I'm stuck again. And the mosquitoes are not letting up. So rocking it back and forth will get me out of the hole, and then I'm going to call this done for demonstration purposes. That's going to be good enough. Well, that's going to be a wrap as far as how I use a post hole digger on a compact utility tractor. If you have some ideas on how maybe to do some things differently, or if you have some tricks that you've learned over time and you want to share those, please leave it in the comments below. I will never claim to know everything there is to know about these tractors or post hole diggers or anything else for that matter. So again, if you have some insight, please share that. I would appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get notified when I upload a new video, and it'll help me grow my channel. Thanks again, and have a great day.